Wraparound with Grace,
Alessia,
and Maryuri.
I'm excited to be back. I missed you guys. I saw the post go up on Instagram and I was like, I'm having a little bit of FOMO right now. I'm feeling a little jealous.
We missed you. We missed you too. Yeah, it felt a little strange just doing it, the two of us, but still. We got through it, and now we're finally back together again. And so I hope you guys have been kind of anticipating or looking forward to this episode, because we have, and it's finally playoff season. There has been a lot of exciting games. Pretty much every series has been pretty exciting, to say the least. But now we're going to kind of dive deep into each series. And first, we're going to start off with the East Division series, starting off with Pittsburgh and the New York Islanders. So as of right now, New York leads 3-2.
This is me. That was my cue, wasn't it?
Yes, it
All
was.
right. Pittsburgh and New York has been pretty interesting. The Islanders have been struggling a lot during regulation, and Pittsburgh has definitely dominated this series as far as it goes with the box score. And if you're like just watching tweets about this game, you're like, why isn't Pittsburgh just like ramping up 8-0 every game, and they haven't swept the series yet? But the Islanders, and this is kind of the same story for Tampa and Florida, which we'll talk about later, they've been saved by their rookie goaltender, who's brand new to the team, Ilya Sorokin. And it's been a really tightly fought series, and the only reason why the Islanders are still in this is their goaltending. But it's also been heating up off the ice because Mike Sullivan called the Islanders a pretty stingy defensive team, and you can quote him on that. He went for that in the post-game press conference the other day. So it's definitely an exciting series to keep your eye on.
Yeah, and their sixth game. Yes, their sixth game will be played tomorrow at 6:30. When you guys are listening to this episode, it will be 6:30 of the night that you're listening to this. So hopefully, knowing that you guys are listening to this on the 26th. So if you guys are listening in, to this in the morning, then it'll be 6:30 at night, and then you guys can catch the sixth game, and then we'll see whether or not New York advances or if Pittsburgh can tie that up. And then we're going to go to the second series in the East, which was Washington and Boston. As we all know, Boston won that series 4-1, and rightly so. I mean, in that IGTV clip of me and Alessia talking, we were kind of saying how we kind of, assumed that Boston was going to get through this series just because they've kind of been really dominant. I mean, we always know that Boston is a really dominant big team, but ever since they added Taylor Hall, they've been kind of, lights out. And so once we knew that they were going to play against Washington and seeing how the first couple of games went, I think it was safe to say that Boston was going to win it. Surprise, Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, and newly acquired Taylor Hall have been absolutely amazing for Boston, and they were absolutely crucial to them winning all those games in order to win the series. Washington probably, hasn't been as good or wasn't as good as they usually are in the playoffs, and they probably weren't as, well put together or didn't have the chemistry that they usually do. Maybe because of the goaltending. We know that what did we say it was? Samsonov that didn't do, a great pass to one of his defensemen, and that's why Boston was able to win one of the games in overtime. So sad to see Washington go, because we always know that they're one of the favorites, whether or not they're playing amazing or, just average. But it's going to be exciting to see Boston in the next round, especially since they've just been so amazing. And it's hard to say that as a Leafs fan, but it'll be really exciting to see, what goes on in the second round, especially depending on who they end up playing. Now, we're going to move on to the Central, and we're going to talk about Carolina and Nashville. And right now, that series is tied 2-2.
Yeah, this has turned into actually a really interesting series. So a lot of you may know the Hurricanes were leading the series 2-0, and the Predators came back to tie the series. And the last two games went into double overtime. So when we spoke about this series in our IGTV, I said Sebastian Aho would have to be amazing, and it would be crucial, his performance, to the success of the Hurricanes. And right now, in 4 games played, he has 3 goals and 2 assists for 5 points. So he's definitely helping the Hurricanes, and hopefully he'll contribute to them battling back and leading this series 3-2.
Yeah, and so by the time this episode comes out, Game 5 will have already been played, since it's being played tonight, the day that we're filming. But it's still great key points from Alessia that you need to kind of keep in mind for Game 6 that will be played on the 27th, I believe. Yeah, the 27th at 9:30. So just keep those in mind. And yeah, I mean, once again, the last time me and Alessia spoke, we said we wanted, I guess we saw the Hurricanes going in, but it's definitely become a much more interesting series than I think we all first thought it would be. So interesting stuff right there. And I think it's always exciting whenever you see a series tied. It's always fun to see because you really don't know what to expect. Now, moving on to the second series or matchup in the Central Division, we're going to talk about Florida and Tampa. And Tampa leads 3-2 as of right now.
This series is kind of funny because it does, as I mentioned before, kind of mimic the Islanders and Penguins series. Tampa should statistically be dominating this. And I think it was probably the second game where that one Florida player, I don't remember his name, was it Lomberg, scored the game-winning goal, and everybody was like, yeah, and then they were like, who? Wait. And I'm like notoriously like a Florida hater. Like, I love the Panthers, but also I love to hate on the Panthers. But they found themselves some luck. Same with the Islanders with their rookie goaltender, Spencer Knight. He's the second youngest goalie to win their postseason debut, and he's only 20 years old. So it's pretty impressive. He definitely kept the Panthers season alive the other day when they were on the brink of elimination, and I kind of want to see him do it again. So we'll see how this series plays out in the next couple of days.
Yep, another tight one. At this point, only the higher powers know who will win this series. The next game will be once again played on the 26th at 8 p.m. So, gotta watch that because another do or die situation for Florida. Now we're gonna move on to the North Division, and we're gonna talk first about the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Montreal Canadiens, and right now Toronto leads 2-1.
Yep.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for like 3 weeks. I don't know what to tell you.
You guys are probably very happy with that, I'm assuming.
We aren't boasting about it. We aren't going to boast about it. That would be bad taste. That would be not very classy, and also probably bad for jinxing purposes. But I feel like this series has been really fun, for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think it's been fun to talk to you guys about it in our group chat during the games, because stuff's just been happening and we're like, hey, Alessia, how you feeling about that one? But I know when Rasmus Sandin scored the other night, I immediately texted Alessia like in all capital letters. I was like, sweet baby child Rasmus.
But hey, we're also good sports because, we've been applauding Mr. Carey Price too.
Exactly. I was going to mention that.
Because he's been incredible.
Yeah, he's been absolutely incredible, and one of the main players that have been keeping the Habs in most of the games that they've played. And I think if it wasn't for him, I think the score wouldn't be as close as it was, at least in Game 1 and Game 3. Although I think Game 1, the Habs were really strong, but like you guys mentioned, Carey Price has just been lights out. And he's definitely keeping them in there. So we'll see what happens tonight. And obviously you guys will know by tomorrow when you're listening to this episode.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting series to watch because the boys have been flying on both teams. Like, the game has been so incredibly fast. And I mean, we all know that, Toronto has been pretty fast this season, and Montreal as well, but it's been crazy insane. And the opportunities on both ends have been incredible. And so this series in particular, not only has it been really exciting to watch because, these are two teams that we know we cheer for personally, but it's just been a really great games overall. And as a hockey fan, it's really, really exciting to watch. And so I'm not going to say too much because you know me, I'm not going to say too much, but Montreal's really, really making it tough for Toronto to kind of, have this in the bag, but that could all change tonight. So we'll have to watch and see.
before we move on, I do just want to get it off my chest, the aggression that I have towards whoever made this NHL schedule. Because you had the ability to mess with the schedule so bad, and you have been this entire time, and then you still stuck us with a back-to-back? In what land?
Right?
You have to. I think it's because
Right?
they have to catch up. They have to catch up to all the other teams.
But they have so much power this season because they can mess around with stuff and be like,
I know.
COVID. They cannot have back-to-back. Anyway, sorry. That was just...
And especially in the playoffs, like think about the players playing back to back. Like let's just say, imagine last night's game went into like OT or
Well,
double
yeah,
OT. Imagine
right?
having to play the next day.
Imagine your
Especially
legs.
this series.
I brought this up
Yeah.
to a friend of mine because we were talking and I was like, in the OHL, they're nasty about it because every year a team has 3 days in a row, 3 games, a
Mhm.
couple times a year over a weekend. So they'll play Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'm like, why? Why do you do this to players? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, I needed to have that rant.
Yeah, just because they're athletes and some of them are pretty young, it doesn't mean that they have like battery power for like a week. Like
Just because
these
they
games are
can
tiring.
play this much doesn't mean they should be.
Yeah.
Should exactly.
And I can't even recall if other series this year have had a back-to-back.
I don't think so.
Is this the first one?
It might.
Which is why I
It
feel
may
so
be the first
slighted.
one.
Of course, it's the series we like to watch. But yeah. Also, just a quick side note as well with the Leafs. Obviously, we all know that John Tavares is currently out for the Leafs. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say anything because then I would be saying something about the Leafs. But hopefully, he gets back soon and he'll be able to play soon. But that's all I'm going to say about them being able to play soon. So yeah, hopefully he comes back soon. Because we know how much of a great presence he is on the Leafs. But moving on, we're going to talk about Edmonton and Winnipeg. As we all know, the Winnipeg Jets have swept the Edmonton Oilers. And we had a little poll on our Instagram, when was it? Yesterday, asking if you thought what was the question? Remind me.
Yeah, so I put it up on our Instagram, and the poll was if our followers thought that the Jets would sweep the Oilers.
Do we have the
Yeah.
numbers on those?
I'm gonna get them right now.
Either way, I answered no because I had hope for Edmonton to at least win one game. I didn't I said no, not because I thought Edmonton was going to come back and win the series. I just thought that maybe they would at least win one game. But I guess
Yeah, I said yes, and the final results were 62% of people said yes, and 38% of people said no.
So maybe those people that said no, probably hopeful like me that at least Edmonton would at least win one game.
Well, in our IGTV, we did mention that we thought the Jets would come out on top in this series.
Yeah.
But I was not expecting the Jets to sweep the Oilers. I was
Same.
expecting at least the Oilers to win one game. It's
Same.
honestly kind of disappointing, to say the
Very.
least.
Very.
It was heartbreaking
like
last night.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys saw, Connor McDavid, we all know how much of a leader he is. He was visibly angry on and off the bench last night.
Okay, that's where I was going to come in because I think looking at this I didn't vote on the poll first of all because I forgot. But I think from an Edmonton point of view, they need this heartbreak. They need this crushing and pummeling into the ground to fix what's wrong with their team because they've been trying it for years now. They have the $100 million man trying to build a team around him and they aren't succeeding. And with one of arguably the best players in the world, why aren't you winning? And it's not that they aren't putting up a good effort. They are. But I really think that they needed this to show them again that you can put in all the work, you can put in all the effort, but your GMs and your coaches have to be better.
No, I was just going to say that's a really good point because even me and Maryuri mentioned when we looked at both teams, the Winnipeg Jets have more depth at all areas on the ice, on D, in goaltending, and on their offensive lines. when you look at the Oilers, they're still depending on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. So until the GMs can figure out a way to provide those two players with depth throughout all of their offensive lines, and even at defense, like last night, Darnell Nurse was an absolute tank. You can't solely rely on him all the time. There needs to be other players to support one another. So, like Grace said, they kind of have to take this and learn from it. Like, this was a good kind of like, let's look in the mirror and see what we can do, because we can't rely always on 2 to 3 players.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. When me and Alessia spoke, we said that they can't just solely rely on those 2 superstars they have on the team. It's just not enough. And that's kind of selfish of them if for doing so, because, it takes the whole team to win these games, not just 2 players. And I even mentioned how even though they finished second in the division, that still meant really pretty much nothing, because it was such a tight race for those second, third, and fourth places that, I think it was just going to be a given that Winnipeg was going to win. And after seeing how poorly, Edmonton performed, they're up 3-1, 4-1, whatever it was. And, they gave that all up. And so clearly they're not disciplined right now. And they need to find a way to work as a team instead of saying, hey, as soon as you hit the ice, pass the puck to Connor, pass the puck to Leon. And so it's going to be difficult for Edmonton to kind of figure that out, because clearly I agree with Grace that they kind of need that heartbreak, but at the same time, it's going to be hard to kind of fix that situation with McDavid, because I'm sure he's pretty much probably really frustrated with how things are going, especially now that Gretzky announced that he's no longer going to be vice chairman of the organization, which, I think also speaks, volumes for where the team and the organization is at as of right now. And so, yeah, it was disappointing to see how the Oilers season ended last night.
They went to triple OT, and so they fought for it, but they also, they didn't fight enough. Like, Darnell Nurse played over an hour, and I was really glad that both you and Alessia brought this up, because Alessia mentioned relying on, one guy to do something, and then relying on one defenseman to do something. And I highly recommend everybody go read Sportsnet Big Reads by Sunny Sachdeva. Can't talk. He has a great piece called Mind Over Matter right now, and it came out a couple days ago, but definitely go read it, because it's all about Darnell Nurse and what he's done as he's taken on a bigger leadership role on the Oilers. And it just shows that they don't just rely on him to be a defenseman. They relied on him to play over an hour last night. They rely on him for even strength, power play, penalty kill, an offensive standpoint. They rely on him to just be like the best defenseman on the team.
That's just so unfair.
He's literally their superstar right now. Like, I could argue that the Edmonton Oilers need Darnell Nurse more right now than they do McDavid. Absolutely. And I think it's incredible to see a team with so much talent, because you have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Like, you have good players on this team. But when you're so focused on 2 or 3 players that you're paying a lot of money for, and that are supposed to be like your showstopper superstars, like, where does the rest of the team fall in? Because 3 guys can't play 60 minutes, or as it turned out to be 120 minutes last night.
It's insane. Yeah, I can only imagine what those 3 guys are really going through right now, because it's probably insanely exhausting.
And all of this will fall on them. All of that pressure is going to fall on those 3 guys.
Exactly. But either way, Winnipeg has obviously played. I mean, it's also at the same time, Winnipeg has been playing absolutely incredible. They have such a great team, and I think we always kind of expect, or at least in the last couple of years, have wanted Winnipeg to get a little bit farther and farther and farther. And I think they have probably the ability this year to kind of get to where they kind of hope to be. So either way, I didn't expect us to be that critical of the Oilers today, but I guess we were.
The Oilers slander is hot in this room.
Yeah.
I think we're all just frustrated because they have just such a great, set of players, and I feel like they can make it work, but it's just, I don't know. It's just the culture right there with how they treat McDavid. And it's not to say that McDavid doesn't deserve the kind of treatment he's getting, because he's such an incredible player. But it's not good when you put a 2 or 3 players on a pedestal like that. But moving on, we're going to do the last division, which is the West, and we're going to talk about Colorado and St. Louis. And as we all know, Colorado also swept their series.
Yeah, so this series, it wasn't a total surprise that Colorado swept the Blues. I think they're a very strong team, like I've mentioned so many times. And I've also mentioned so many times that they're my cup favorites this year. They were last year too. And when you look at all 4 games, they were not close in score. So it just proves how strong Colorado is and how they were the better team. McKinnon also had a great performance in this series. He's now leading all forwards with 6 goals in the postseason. So that's incredible. And since we last spoke about the Avalanche, Nazem Kadri was suspended 8 games and is in the process to appeal that. So
all I can say is not so surprise. Like, come on. Kadri got suspended in the game in the Leafs series against Washington. I don't know why he does this. It's just kind of silly to me to think that he knows what kind of the risks are. I know that he wants to be physical and he wants to kind of set the tone for the series and the games, but at the same time you have to see how your team is doing and who you're playing up against. You obviously, every team has the mentality that they're going to win this series and then they're going to get ahead, but in this kind of situation, you have to look at your team and be like, okay, I think we're kind of okay here. I don't really have to set too much of a like that kind of tone in order to win this series. So I don't know. I thought it was really, just dumb.
You can tell when Marjorie's really disappointed with a person, and this is one of those moments.
It's just so silly. Like, why would you risk, like, one, why would you do that to your team? Because now going into the second round, if his appeal isn't heard, then obviously he can't play. And 2, why would you not want to play like on like the biggest stage right now?
I think that there was a lot of disappointment in Leafs fans when Kadri left, because he was like our enforcer. He was our guy for a long time. But I think that over the past few seasons, just his behavior on the ice and how he reacts to these kind of suspensions and everything has just proven and reiterated why that trade was so necessary. And I think alleviated any concerns that Leafs fans would have had over the trade. And now it's on Colorado. So
now it's a Colorado's problem. But
yeah. And I was just going to say, I think Colorado's a deep team, so obviously it's a loss to have Nazem Kadri out of the lineup, but I'm pretty sure they can keep going without him.
Yeah, Colorado's a great team, and like me and Alessia said that the other time, I think it was kind of a no-brainer that Colorado was going to win this series. St. Louis, just, I don't know, they're just not the same from when they won the Cup, and it's just, I think they also need to fix some maybe discipline issues on that team, personality issues, get them back to being a team and not so discombobulated. Because we all know what happened with Binnington and like Grubauer, and like it was just not. It's not the kind of thing you guys like. I think you often see in hockey, and it's not the kind of thing you like to see in general. But yeah, either way, moving on, we're going to talk about the last series, which is Vegas and Minnesota, and currently Vegas leads 3-2.
I was so excited when they told me that I was allowed to talk about Vegas today.
You're always allowed to talk about Vegas.
Yeah, so Vegas leading 3-2, which is kind of actually a little disappointing. And not, I think a lot of people saw Minnesota coming out on top, but from the way Vegas came out in games 2 and 3 and 4, it was kind of like, oh, they're going to do it. Like, they're going to make it. One of the big parts of that was Marc-Andre Fleury, who had a crazy save percentage. What was it, like .966 going into the game last night? And I bragged about it a little too much, and it fell apart.
Backfired.
But statistically, the Golden Knights should be golden after the series. Like, they should be winning after the series. And I think that Minnesota's doing a great job to fight back, though. And yesterday, it's so odd to think about because they're fighting back, but they only had 14 shots
Yeah.
in the game last night.
Yeah.
Whereas Vegas had upwards of 35, whatever the specific number was.
It was 37.
It was,
Mhm.
yeah, so almost more than double. And it's like, what are you guys doing? So it really does, again, this is another one of those crazy kind of goaltending battles, I think, where if one goalie's slacking, the other team's going to really push ahead because both of these teams are so great at scoring and they're so offensively skilled that, like, if one goalie falters for a minute, you're going to see this series shift drastically one way or the other. But they play again. When is it, Marjorie? Tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's going to be the 26th at 9 p.m. So hopefully you guys are listening to this in the morning, and then you guys can watch it in the nighttime, and then we'll see whether or not Vegas pushes through or if Minnesota fights back. I mean, once again, me and Alessia predicted that maybe Minnesota would come out on top because of, the young talent that they have on the team. Secretly, deep down, I'm hoping Minnesota pulls through because they're a team that I actually quite enjoy. Sorry, Grace. But yeah, you never know.
Oh, whatever.
Whatever. But yeah, so that was all of the matchups for as of right now. Hopefully next week we can talk about some new matchups and that'll be super exciting. But before we leave, as always, I always have a question to ask Grace and Alessia, and this week it's your matchups to keep an eye on. So we're gonna start off with Grace.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. Florida and Tampa Bay, I think, is actually my matchup to watch, which might sound a little surprising to most people. But I do really want to see what Spencer Knight can do for the Panthers. And I think that'll be something really exciting to keep an eye on.
So last week I said coming into the playoffs that Tampa and the Panthers were actually my series to watch. Right now, I'm kind of very interested to see how the Hurricanes and the Predators do. Just seeing the Predators come back and tie the series after being down 2-0, I think it's going to be a really good series to keep your eye on.
Completely agree. That's definitely one I'm going to keep tabs on, especially because the Hurricanes is actually another team that I actually really enjoy and really like. So hopefully the Hurricanes can pull through. But yes, great matchups to watch, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode. We love talking about these matchups. I mean, we love talking about hockey in general, and it's nice to talk about some things kind of in depth like this for the first time in a while. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Give us your brackets, your predictions, your favorite players from these series. Tweet us, DM us on Instagram, email us, whatever your favorite form of communication is. Let us know. And thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you next week.